Good day, I'm Angeli Alba, Communications Officer in Asia Pacific for Habitat for Humanity International. And today I am with Susanne Legena of TAN International Australia, the Deputy CEO, and we will be talking about inclusivity in terms of our development agenda.
Great.
Okay, and we'll be focusing more on age, about children and youth. So I guess my first question would be, what do you think about the state of inclusivity, and especially in terms of age in Asia Pacific and globally, if you have any insights on that?
So, I work for Plan International, and we have this philosophy that from the very beginning we involve children and young people in both the analysis of the problem and also in the design of the solutions, because we feel like they are the actual experts of their own situation and they need to be part of the solutions. So for me, I think that kind of philosophy, that if it's about them, they should be involved in the very early stages in thinking about how do they understand what the problem is, what do they think are the proper solutions. It's a unique perspective, and it's the one I think that we should be considering in all our development questions and in all organisations. It's a perspective that is otherwise missing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the solutions or interventions people come up with don't work because the right people haven't been consulted in the first place. So if you think, if these issues are about children and young people, or they've got a stake in it, they need to be involved from the beginning.
You say something about the missing piece in the development agenda that we are providing or talking about. I guess at the international, global, national level contexts. What do you think are the challenges? Why is this piece missing? Is it a lack of awareness about the roles that the young people and children will play in the development agenda?
I think there are good people everywhere who see that children and young people have to be part of the solutions, but I think it's true to say that they don't vote largely. And when you don't vote, you're not counted, you don't have political power, people think that you don't have influence, they think that they can make decisions for you. Whereas I think what we've learnt from our experience over a long period of time, we've been working in development for 80 years,
Mm-hmm.
is that, young people have a kind of unique insight into some of their own issues, and they're the best people to come up with the solutions and the interventions with you that will tackle those problems. They know, for example, that you're dealing with an HIV problem between men who have sex with men.
Yeah.
It's those young people who'll tell you that a particular app on their phone is the place where they're hooking up. So that might be the place where you might need an intervention. Now, people who aren't using those apps, that technology, they won't know that. They'll design interventions that might be quite separate. So I think the involvement of the young people in some of the solutions will allow you to have better results.
When you mentioned that young people don't vote, and they don't have these formalized spaces in which they can have their opinions heard, how do you then bring them into the conversation? How do you encourage them to speak out about the issues that are important to them?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. It's one that all organisations should be asking themselves. I'm very impressed that an organisation like the Asian Development Bank has set apart a journey, if you like, of trying to, in the first instance at least, elevate the voices of young people. But over time, it's trying to really involve young people in its operations. It's really trying to consider what its value add is. So if a bank that largely deals in infrastructure sees that it's important, given that there are 700 million young people in this region, 60% of the young people in the world are in this region, that they need to be part of the work, then I think other organisations can do it too.
Okay. And while we have these organizations now entering into partnerships, bringing in the young people to design and implement these kinds of solutions, how then do we measure the level of inclusivity of the youth in the development agenda?
I mean, one of the questions I always ask and that Plan asks in its work is, it often goes to meetings and it looks around the room and says, who isn't here? So I think we have to ask that, because I mean, I think the involvement, it's not just the involvement of young people, right? It's a diverse range of young people from all kinds of backgrounds who bring this diverse perspective. You know, this morning we had Angeli from Nepal, a human and a deaf person, talking about the challenges and barriers of being a deaf person in Nepal. Now, had she not been here, we wouldn't have that perspective. We'd be conducting our meeting without consideration for, what is it like for the everyday experience of people with a disability in a place like Nepal? What are the challenges she faces? What are the barriers she has to overcome? So having not just young people, but a diverse range of young people that we can include in these discussions, and finding ways, either through technology or other consultation methods, to ensure that we bring those people in, I think it's a really important part of the process of human development from here on in.
You mentioned earlier about the importance of participation and how we can measure our success by measuring participation. How do you do that? How do you capture that? And what kinds of data do you want to capture when you're looking at participation and inclusivity?
So, I mean, all our projects would measure this kind of question, not just of outputs like number of young people involved or touched as beneficiaries, but there are measures of, the degree to which they were involved in the design. In my own work, it is a consideration for me to have to account for, whether or not particular policies or governance arrangements I've organised, whether I've consulted with young people or not, is something I've built into our business processes, so that I'm accountable, I'm transparent about whether or not this has actually been reviewed by young people, and I've considered what their views are in taking a decision. So I think they're small ways. I'm sure it'll be different for each organisation, but I think it is important that you're really transparent and find a way to track whether or not you're doing it in an authentic way, and whether or not it's making a difference over time.
Okay. And as we are talking about the global goals, we all know that these are sort of soft laws. Governments may make their commitments, but in essence, there's really no way for us to enforce these commitments with the governments. How then do we encourage governments to start measuring these SDGs? Do we have any kind of tools? Do we have mechanisms by which we can measure the achievements that for all of these targets that we're talking about?
I mean, nevertheless, most countries have signed on to the global goals, and for me, that's enough to hold them to account. And I think in these early years, one of the first questions we do have to ask is, do we have a way to measure the indicators in our own national context? How will the global goals, the SDGs, be measured? I know that there are some global tools which have ranked the performance of countries against the global goals as they are right now. It's like a benchmark. I know this because Australia is like number 20, and I think it could be much higher. So there are some benchmarking tools that people like us and civil society and young people can use to kind of benchmark where their governments are, and to ask those questions of what isn't being measured and how will it be measured and how can we hold you to account. I know that Plan has got a particular interest in Global Goal 5, which is related to gender equality, and we're working with partners now to try to design a tool that allow us to not just track the statistics and the indicators from a kind of quantitative point of view, but to collect the stories as well. That'll show us what's really changing and what's not changing, what interventions or work do we need to really work on, who are the people who are missing out. So we want to do a kind of a combination of the kind of hard measures and also the stories of change, and bring those kind of two things together in a way that we can hold governments to account, and we can share with them what we're learning as we go.
This is actually a very interesting conversation, because we are currently, for Habitat, we are looking at SDG 11 and SDG 1, and the conversations around the New Urban Agenda for Habitat 3, for example, are looking at how to make the document more accountable. How do we measure all of these changes that we want to see? But where is the space for the youth and the young people? Have they been given the chance to provide input to these kinds of measures, to the global goals?
I think in the development of the global goals, they were very, very engaged. I mean, it was a very democratic process. I think in the creation of the indicators, that has been a more a specialist.
Mm-hmm.
Specialists and experts have been involved in that task more. Nevertheless, we now have those indicators for each of those goals, and I think that they're available through technology. People can access it via the internet. As I said, you can benchmark, you can see where your government is performing, where it's falling below the standards. You can use that information. I think the information's there. The challenge now is for young people to use the information that's available, and which they're really good at accessing, and create the spaces for those kind of conversations within their own context.
So now, how do you think can young people and older people work together towards the development agenda? And do you think that the so-called generation gap has anything to do with the process?
I told a story this morning, and it's a really powerful one for me, of transformation, where I work with a group of young ambassadors, and in my work last year, we share with them what our goals are for the year, what our work is, what kind of advocacy we're planning on doing, what we wanted to lobby on. And when I shared our plans, they looked at that stuff and they said, yeah, it's really good, Susanne, but where is climate change on your list? And I said, well, it's on my list, but it's way down. We're a child rights organisation. We're not an environmental organisation. We will work in coalition. Of course, we'll echo what everyone else is calling for. And they went away and they came back and they said to me, climate change is the biggest intergenerational justice issue. If you're a child rights organisation, climate change needs to be number one on your agenda. I found that really confronting, but I think that they were right. And as a result of listening to that, I was able to sort of ask them, okay, so if I was to make that a priority for our work this year, and you were to work with me to make that work, what would we do? And as a result, our work got flipped on its head, but it's the work that I'm most proud of ever doing, because I feel like I learned something that I didn't really understand. I mean, I kind of saw climate change as a big environmental issue. I saw it as a justice issue, but I didn't really understand it as this kind of intergenerational justice issue, and that I had a real role to play as a leader in my organisation in really amplifying the voices of young people in that debate. And I was able to do that, and as I said, it's the work that I am most proud of doing.
So it seems like an authentic dialogue with young people, and really listening to their thoughts and their insights is sort of encouraging this paradigm shift.
Changed my mind. They changed my heart, and they completely changed my view. And as a result, I think we became a stronger organisation, and I think we've learnt a way of doing our work with young people that is different from the way we did it before, and more authentic, more genuine. And I don't go into those meetings anymore with my long list. I come in with some of my ideas, but we have a more genuine discussion about whether or not those things really line up with the things that they think are the most pressing issues for them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.